What comes to your mind when you watch the news hour debates these days?
That makes no sense.
ये क्या मजाक चल रहा
Really?
Why are they shouting all the time?
Honestly, same. News hour debates are a popular primetime content that we all have consumed. But do they always make for good debates? How do we know if watching a debate is worth our time? What arguments are people making and what makes for a good or bad argument? Irrespective of whether we agree or disagree with the sides they take, the art of analyzing information and sifting through baseless content is crucial for our times. Let's break these concepts down in this video using logical fallacies. Logical fallacies are defects or errors that make an argument weak or invalid. An argument has two parts, a premise or statement that talks about a fact and a conclusion that is a claim. For example, she is bad at driving because she is a woman. A logical fallacy is made when the premise is not known to be true or if the conclusion is not directly derived from the premise. Let's take an example. We know that if it rains, the street will be wet. One can say that the street is wet because it rained. This argument seems valid, but it is not, because the street can be wet due to many reasons other than the rain. The better argument is, it rained, therefore the street is wet. Remember that just because an argument has a fallacy, it does not mean that it is false. It just means that the argument has been constructed incorrectly and can be made more valid. As it turns out, there are many types of logical fallacies. Let's take a look at some examples of these fallacies being made in popular media. Hasty generalization is one such fallacy which involves making a sweeping statement about a population or phenomena based on only a few examples.
We know where the Muslim population is large, there's always trouble because the Islamic ideology says so.
I mean, there's 200 million Muslims living in India. That's the
Yeah, we have no
second
problem
largest
with that.
Muslim population in the world. And you're saying that wherever Muslims live, there's
If
problems?
Muslims become more than 30%, that country is in danger.
Taking the example of a few problematic extremists, this politician is quick to generalize it to all Muslims. Another example is the loaded question. A loaded question is a fallacy wherein the question being asked contains a rather controversial assumption.
Well, you don't seem to talk as yet of retirement. You don't talk in the book about raising a family, motherhood. What's life beyond tennis going to be?
That's a question that I face all the time as a woman. Is first is marriage and then is motherhood. Unfortunately, that's when we are settled, and no matter how many Wimbledons we win or number one in the world, we don't become settled.
I must apologize in a sense. I think I phrased that question very bad. I would never ask this question to a male athlete, when are you settling down?
Here, the question assumes that a woman athlete requires settling down and experience motherhood to lead a fulfilling life, which is a defective way of asking a question. Fortunately, the journalist was quick to realize his mistake and apologize. Next, ad hominem is a logical fallacy when a person starts personally attacking the opposer rather than counter-arguing logically.
आप ऐसे पुलिस के बारे में इस प्रकार की भाषा का इस्तेमाल करते हो, क्या ये एक महिला को शोभा देता है? जो पढ़ी लिखी महिला है उनको शोभा देता है? अगर हमने ये कहा तो बोलते हमको धमकी दी, ये मेंटल केस है.
Rather than refuting her demand for protection that he thinks is unnecessary, he makes a personal statement about her to deflect from counter-arguing. Another example is the logical fallacy of red herring is an argument made specifically to distract from relevant questions or issues. Wait, isn't most of today's news an example of this? These are just a few logical fallacies among the hundreds of which exist. Since we cannot address all of them, please find the document in the description box for a list of numerous fallacies with examples. But why is it so important to learn about logical fallacies? In the contemporary world, we are constantly exposed to information. Being able to judge the quality of this information presented to us by the media is therefore important and is called media literacy. In a study, Weinberg and McGrew compared the way college students, historians, and professional fact-checkers judge the credibility of news websites. They found that novices who relied on checklists of the usual credibility cues almost always got duped, but experts who applied logical fallacies were faster and more accurate. Research also shows that fake news has more logical fallacies than authentic news. So then, how can you identify a bad argument using logical fallacy? Step 1. Identify areas of contention. When you come across a piece of information or news, think of what specifically would people take sides about. Step 2. Think of what logical fallacies would people likely fall into while defending or opposing the issue. Step 3. Try and find if there are one or more of these fallacies in the presentation of this news. If fallacies are present, it is probably a bad argument. Fallacious arguments are very common and can be quite persuasive, so it is sometimes hard to evaluate them. The goal is not to label arguments as fallacious or fallacy-free, but to help you critically look at your own arguments and move them away from the weak toward the strong end of the continuum. But mere identification is not enough. How can you avoid fallacies in your own argument? Here are some tips. First, pretend you disagree with the argument you're making. What parts of the argument would now seem fishy to you? What parts would seem the easiest to attack? Strengthen those parts. Second, list your main points, then list the evidence you have for each. This may help you look more critically at the evidence you're using. Thirdly, learn which type of fallacies you're especially prone to and check for them in your work. Fourth, be aware that broad claims need more proof than narrow ones. And finally, double check your characterization of others to be sure that they are accurate and fair. You may be able to avoid logical fallacies from your end or even identify them in others. But how can you correct others' misinformation in an effective manner? Studies show that exposing the scientific flaws of an argument undermines its effectiveness. A study was conducted wherein participants were shown tweets which were corrected by pointing out the fallacy in them. They were then asked to rate the credibility of the original tweet. As expected, logic-based corrections made people question the information and reduce their level of agreement more than any other kind of correction. Inoculation theory states that people can be protected from false content by exposing them to small amounts of fake content, just like we can protect people from a dangerous virus by exposing them to a vaccine to help their bodies identify and fight it. Could awareness about different logical fallacies then be the vaccination that we need to protect ourselves from fake or propaganda news? Share your thoughts with us in the comments down below. For more logical content like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.